from the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
A lengthy curse comes to an end. The head coach is looking to secure his future in Saskatchewan. Did the Bombers' defense look a little leaky against the Lions? And that final push of the East title is underway. Speaking of underway, this is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. Welcome to the podcast, folks. I'm Bubba O'Neil, and I'm joined by award-winning Sportsnet producer and reporter and CFL.ca contributor, Donnovan Bennett.
I just come on so you can say nice things about me. So happy to be here.
Hey, glad you're with us. Hey, from 770 CHQR. He's the Hall of Fame voice of the Calgary Stampeders, Mark Stephen.
Good morning. Still trying to unpack what happened Friday night at McMahon Stadium.
And from CFL News Hub, along with the Jet Press, the man who actually believes that Zach Wilson is the new Joe Willie Namath, Mike Mitchell. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Bubba. Maybe not. I won't go that far. But thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
All right, guys, let's get right down to business. Hey, Tiger Cats beat the Stampeders. I'll be straight with it there, Mark Stephen, starting with you. You saw it. You called the game. This Hamilton Tiger Cat team, are they destined to be playoff spoilers?
Well, I don't know if it put too much into one win, but the fact is they lost a lot of heartbreaking, crushing games earlier this year. And maybe things are reversing and starting to even out. And it was just a crazy, crazy game, much like the game Calgary played in Hamilton with so many twists and turns to it. Are they ready to play spoiler? I don't know just yet. I'm not going to put too much into one game, but it was impressive, I got to say. And let's see where it takes them, because obviously it's been a terribly frustrating year up until that point.
Mike, what'd you see?
I'm impressed with the way Hamilton's playing of late. They've been more balanced offensively. Their defense has always been good. They have good special teams. I think they can definitely play spoiler. They're battle-tested, the Ticats. I mean, this is a team that has a psychological edge over teams like Montreal and Toronto because they beat them last year in the playoffs. They've been to 2 straight Grey Cups. So you can't discount that. Even though their record doesn't look pretty, Hamilton's been in a lot of close games. They've been very competitive, and they proved their mettle. You know, whether you want to say Calgary botch things towards the end of that game or not, that's a big-time victory to go in Calgary, something that Hamilton has done in ages. And to win that game in the fashion that they did, Hamilton is a threat. And we've seen in the past, there have been teams from the East that have won the Grey Cup that have had less than stellar records at the end of the season, 500 or worse. So we saw that with Ottawa and Toronto not too long ago. So I think Hamilton is fully capable of playing with any team in the CFL and getting back to a Grey Cup again. And wouldn't that be crazy playing in Winnipeg again? But here we are. You have to respect Hamilton's history. Orlando, Dane, all the guys on their defensive side of the ball, they've done this before, so why can't they do it again?
Donnovan on CFL.ca. I don't know if you do the picks, but it was a clean sweep for Calgary. Everyone got shut out.
I don't do the pick, but I'm not going to come on here in front. I would have picked Calgary too. Why wouldn't you have? But I will say this, the entire league should hope that Saskatchewan gets in via crossover, because this Hamilton team you don't want to see in a one-game scenario. Just look at the last month, right? They've won 3 of their last 4. Sounds good, trending in the right direction. Who they've beat? They've beaten Saskatchewan. They've beaten Winnipeg. They've now beaten Calgary. They've been really good battle-tested teams. And when they struggled in the middle of the season, when they played what it seems like 1,000 games against the Argos, they were really banged up. Quarterback position, banged up. The linebacker position, banged up. So they're starting to get healthy now. Dane has worked out whatever was ailing him, whether it's mentally or physically mid-season. They have Simone back in the middle of the field, who is someone who at the beginning of the week, offensive coordinators have the red laser pointer and they're circling him. Those things change everything. And let's be honest, they threw away a lot of games that they should have won early. So I don't want to see the Tiger Cats if I'm an opposing offensive or defensive coordinator in the playoffs.
You know, Mark, when I looked at the halftime stats when I was doing that halftime show, I was alarmed at, first of all, the time of possession in favor of the Stampeders. And then I looked at offensive plays. This is a half of football. Calgary ran 40 plays. The Tiger Cats ran 14 and yet found a way to pull out a victory.
Yeah, it was a little unnerving because the score was so close. There's no reason it should have been close for the reasons you just mentioned. The stats were hopelessly one-sided, but Calgary threw 3 interceptions and a half, and they committed a lot of silly penalties, primarily on returns that took a lot of yardage off the boards on returns. So I think, I understand that Hamilton won. I give them credit, but an awful lot of that too was the Stampeders got in the Stampeders' way. I mean, they did a lot of things that have been uncharacteristic for them, but that's the reality. They were in their own way with a large number of turnovers and costly penalties.
Mark makes a great point there. I will say that. I think going into that contest, Jake Maier had only thrown 4 interceptions and he got picked off 3 times in one half. But I think you have to kind of balance that with the fact that he kind of bailed out due to the pressure that the Ticats were sending to him.
Yeah, Mark Washington, they had a great game plan there with the Ticats. They really did fluster them. Calgary is such a great running team. Jake Maier is in situations where he doesn't, he can convert easy completions. And then if you get them second and long and start rushing him with the pressure in his face, they change the game there. And I know Calgary had the ball for a long time, but when you throw a pick six, you're back in the field again. So that's kind of the story there. So I was really impressed with Hamilton's game plan. Their coaching has been really good this last stretch, the last month or so. And against Calgary, who's one of the better coach teams in the CFL, that's a difficult chess match to win. I thought Hamilton won that chess match defensively versus their offense on that particular night.
See, I see it differently because I think the way the game ended and who won changed the conversation. You had, for me, a questionable decision by Orlando Steinauer to go for it late, and a more than questionable play call by Tommy Condell. I think the talk radio, the comments on this podcast, if that goes differently, and essentially we're talking about Hamilton not going to the postseason today, we're having an entirely different conversation. So Dane Evans and Poppy White need to have had big hugs from Orlando Steinauer and Tommy Condell because essentially they saved the conversation and essentially saved the season.
Yeah, I that's a fair point. I thought the defensive game plan for Hamilton was very good. Some of the situational moves by Orlando this season have been questionable, and you brought up fair points there. Condell as well, the offensive coordinator there for the Ticats. So, you're absolutely correct, Donnovan, on that aspect of it. They almost got burned. They got bailed out at the end there, so those would have come into play. But I did think the defensive game plan for the Ticats was excellent against Calgary. They pressured their quarterback and forced them into turnovers. I thought that was one of Hamilton's best performances defensively.
And I'm just going to say, you mentioned coaching. The Ticats obviously made some big adjustments at the half because Kadeem Carey was chewing them up badly early, and that was not the case in the second half. Conversely, we talk about things Hamilton is doing well. They've committed to the run game, which is something he hadn't done much of all year, and got a good one in the Hills. I think he's a really good looking back.
Yeah, he really is. But Mark, you called that game. You were there live. When they stood on the offense, the Ticats offense stood on the field with a little under 2 minutes remaining, third down, and I thought was a healthy one from, I believe, their 22. Did you think this was Looney Tunes or what?
I'm shocked. Sure. Totally shocked. That's, there's certain risks that you take, and I thought that was an extremely high risk play. So yeah, I was quite shocked. Maybe you do that kind of stuff near midfield. So if you do have a turnover, it's not as egregious, but they left it on the doorstep. Yeah, I was quite shocked with it, to be honest.
And Donnovan, it's interesting when you look at that game, especially in the final moments of the game, it was like Hamilton were playing some of those early season games, giving themselves every reason to lose. They got caught napping on that short kick. The third down gamble gets stuffed. And then earlier, just moments earlier, the possession before, Wes Hills, who hasn't fumbled all season long, nice screen pass, picks up about 10 yards and then drops the football. It was like, here we go again.
It was, which is actually why I'm pretty bullish on this team moving forward, specifically Dane Evans, because how many times have we seen a replay of something going wrong late in the game and Dane literally looking up at the heavens, almost expecting something bad to happen, and it would snowball from there, and that wasn't the case, and he was the reason why they righted the ship. He was super calm under pressure in the pocket, and so I think if they do go on a run, and if Dane goes on to reach the heights that many people thought he would when he was leading them in back-to-back Grey Cups, I think we might say like that game, that fourth quarter, the last 3 minutes might be a turning point, a changing of the chapters in terms of his career, because it was a questionable decision that he had to bail them out of. And I think the point, though, Bubba, that you made about the long yard being an important one, because Mike, as you know, in the NFL, we're having this great conversation about when to go for it, when the analytics say, the more progressive coaches being aggressive. And what gets lost is, well, situation matters, right? The algorithm can't tell you it's inches to go or it's a long yard to go. The algorithm can't tell you how you fired off the ball to that point in the game to get that, or if you have a play that you really like that you haven't used yet. And I thought, throw out the math. The situation to me seemed like an odd choice, but great players can bail you out of bad decisions if you're a coach, and I think that's what we saw.
That's definitely the case. It's funny in short yardage in the CFL. A lot of times, even in the NFL, you see people say, "Oh, come on, you can't make a yard." But it's not an apples to apples kind of thing, because you got a situation where everyone's condensed into one area, so it's difficult to convert. In the CFL, you got different line of scrimmage rules. So I think sometimes CFL coaches think, this, if we can't make this 1 yard, I mean, what are we doing here? So a lot of times they're willing to take that risk, because honestly, if you're worth any salt in the CFL, you have to be able to convert that play. Now, so I mean, that's just the best teams in the CFL are able to do so. That's why a lot of times the rushing touchdown leaders are backup quarterbacks, like the Dominique Davises of the world, because that is a crucial play in the CFL, being able to convert those kind of plays. So that is a risk, though, when you're on your own end and you're doing that, you're asking for trouble. So there's definitely that. Right now analytics is kind of like overrunning things, and people don't run on their gut and their feel. So that's and a lot of NFL teams, CFL teams make mistakes just leaning on that. You have to have a feel for the game. But, it's fascinating, the CFL, just the short yardage game, how important it is. And how, I've seen teams like Toronto struggle doing that. And they finally put Chad Kelly in, and he's doing okay in that area. But Toronto's been one of the worst teams to convert in that. And you sit there, throw your hands in the air, how the hell you're unable to convert this. So it's a fascinating discussion, and it's something that really gets a lot more discussion nowadays. I've seen NFL teams now implementing, what they should have been doing a long time ago, having a blocker come up, wide receiver comes in motion and just pushes the quarterback. So now the Eagles have set it up with Jalen Hurts, where they have two wide receivers come in motion and they just blatantly push the quarterback. And maybe we should start seeing that in CFL too. They're not going to get flagged for it. So that's just a better way of converting it. But yeah, it's fascinating to see how coaches handle these situations.
Well, if they're not going to call it, right, until they actually enforce that rule, and start to penalize the Reggie Bush push, you might as well do it. But you hit the nail on the head when you said, well, if you're not going to get 1 yard, and coach saying, well, if we can't get 1 yard, what are we doing? And I get that, but then don't line your tailback 7 yards deep or out of shotgun with no momentum 5 yards deep, right? If it's just about that 1 yard, well, then have a specialist that's a bigger, stronger quarterback who can get you those yards. Put them behind a guard and a center who's combined bench and squat, right, is enough to make sure you get the 1 yard. And so I get the thought process, but your methodology has to follow that philosophy.
Yeah, I'll never really understand the 3rd and 1 or the 2nd and 1 or the 4th and 1 with your quarterback standing in the shotgun or even in the pistol. It blows me away. Let's change topic here, guys. The Argos and Alouettes, both winners this week, and now they're set to enter into what should be a real fun 2-game showdown, really what could be for the East Division. The Alouettes must sweep there, Mike Mitchell. Do you like their chances?
It's so strange because Montreal and Toronto met so early in the season that both teams are so different now. I mean, Montreal's got a different head coach. At the time, Vernon Adams is their starting quarterback. And then Toronto was fortunate to beat Montreal. David Cope missed an easy field goal at the end of that game. So I do like the Owls' chances of measuring up with Toronto. Stanback started getting a little bit better in his last performance there. He started running better. Walter Fletcher's done a good job for them. I think they're equally matched, both teams. Toronto's defense is very good, particularly in the red zone. They've given up the least majors in the league. So Corey Mace has done a tremendous job. He's one of the best young assistants in the league. They have a very good defensive staff, and they're very deep in their defensive backfield. They're moving players all over the place. Chris Edwards plays the same position. Now he's playing out in corner. Jamal Peters has been fantastic. So I think both teams are evenly matched. In the CFL, it's difficult, as you guys know, to win 2 games in a row against the same opponent. Montreal gets Toronto at home first. If they don't win that, it's over. The Argos have won the East. So that's a vital one. Can they do it? Sure they can. Absolutely. I think that this is going to be a very tightly contested games. It's going to come down to quarterback play. You got Trevor Harris and McLeod Bethel-Thompson. Jekyll and Hyde with McLeod. In this, and it's in every game. In every game, like against Edmonton, he plays like a C quarterback, a C minus quarterback in the first half, and then in the second half throws for nearly 300 yards. So he does that. It's not a week to week thing with him. He just runs hot and cold. But I think Montreal has a chance. Obviously, they got to get it done on Saturday at home. Otherwise, they're getting ready for Hamilton.
Donnovan, you're shaking your head when the name McLeod Bethel-Thompson comes up. Look at your facial expression.
Man, listen, there are some MBT truthers out there where if you say one bad thing about him on Twitter or question, his validity as a starter, they'll come for you and they'll present the stats. And I'll just say, sure, like let's sit down, let's watch the tape of, the wide open, crossers that he's missing, the times where he pre-snap, predetermines where he's going to go with the football, the times where, it's second and long and he's checked down Charlie when that doesn't do anything for you, right? It's just so all stats aren't good. He has a lot of stats where he's accumulating them, but he's not necessarily making the right football decision. The problem is that he has an NFL level arm. And when he's right, and I think the Argos have one of the most talented receiving groups, and they really haven't been healthy. They're I don't know if we've ever seen their best 5. I don't know, quite frankly, if they know who their best 5 are, and if everyone's healthy, who those guys would be. So he does, tease you every once in a while, generally in a second half after a terrible first half. But yeah, it is. I lose. For someone who loves clean, efficient football, I lose a lot of sleep. But you can't totally say, I want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, because he'll make a play or make a throw that not many people in this league can make, and that's why he's still the guy for now. But you want to date? I don't know if you necessarily want to marry. But when you talk about this matchup with the Alouettes, the Alouettes come in winning 4 of the last 5. If we look at who's the better football team right now, it is Montreal. Toronto, struggles in a track game to beat Edmonton and probably should have lost that game. Similar to the way Calgary, hurt themselves. Their Alberta friends did the same thing. But it's not even to me about, who could win in a 1-game scenario. If you're Montreal, essentially, to get to the Grey Cup, you have to beat Toronto 3 times. You might have to beat them twice in the regular season, and then you might have to see them again in the postseason, most likely, and beat them again. So, Mike mentioned how tough it is to beat a team twice in this league. 3 times in the span of a month is tough. So it'll be really interesting to see on both sides how much they show, knowing there's a likelihood they're going to see each other again with a chance going to the Grey Cup.
I'm just going to say this conversation points out what I've believed all along. There's no more polarizing player in the CFL than McLeod Bethel-Thompson. I don't know if I'm a fan of his, but I look at the results. It's ugly. It's awkward at times. It's unconventional, but he does put up the numbers, and Toronto's on top. So I guess I'd put myself in the supporters column, not maybe his biggest supporter, but I understand that the results are there. And in the end, that's what counts. And he's got the results to show.
But Mark and Bubba and Mike, you guys, I'm sure, would have a viewpoint on this. Is that more so? Forget about McLeod, right? Let's use him as a baseline. Is that more so a testament of where quarterback play is in this league right now, by and large? Because the retort is, okay, well, how many QBs in the league would you trade for him? And that list, how long is it? Depends, I suppose, what your taste is in quarterback. But ask our friends in Saskatchewan about their feelings about Cody Fajardo in any given series. The Trevor Harris experience has always been one that's up and down. And I think he's probably, going to end up with Hall of Fame type numbers, right? We had a golden era of Anthony Calvillo and Ricky Ray and Damon Allen, and before that, Tracy Ham and so on and so forth. lineage of just Calgary, like every single quarterback that came through was a Hall of Famer. And now you got to really squint to say who's playing in the league right now that's going to have a butt. Zach? Other than that, right, like Trevor hasn't been the guy to win a Grey Cup, right? He's been on a Grey Cup team. There's lots of reasons for that. And the change of the game in the NFL, I think, is a big part of it. But I think it's a testament to where quarterback plays in the league across the board.
So are we saying that we like Trevor Harris's chances more so than McLeod Bethel Thompson there, Mike?
Trevor's extremely efficient quarterback, sometimes to the point where he's boring. McLeod's certainly not boring. The one thing I will say about him, though, is the talent is definitely there. And then from a character and teammate and toughness standpoint, he has the full support of his teammates in the locker room. McLeod is a high character guy, a little bit unique, but he takes a beating. The Toronto's giving up the third most sacks. They're down to like their fourth and fifth offensive tackles. So McLeod is fully capable. He's not an elite player. He's not an efficient player like a Trevor Harris, high completion percentage, all that. But McLeod is fully capable. I mean, I saw it last year in Hamilton where he threw for over 300 yards in the second half and beat the Ticats on Thanksgiving Day. Not an easy place for them to go into the hammer and win. So I think McLeod is fully capable. He's a competent, like a B quarterback in the CFL. He's not an A. Like, he gives you too much C. But he does have elite performances. That's why the numbers are there, and he's won a lot. This isn't just a compiler, because the Toronto's been last in the league in rushing. So a lot of their success is based on McLeod making plays. So and that's where they've been this year. That's why he's leading the league in passing yards, and a lot because they have to throw a lot. But I think he's better than people give him credit for. But he's definitely, like Donnovan brought up, he's not in the upper echelon of quarterbacks that we've been accustomed to watching in the CFL. And he can be frustrating for Argos fans and all that, because he'll go through a stretch where he's mistiming his throws, missing open receivers. It's like aggravating. But then, you live with the good and the bad with him because of his toughness, his character, and he's winning a lot of games. Last 2 years,
Bingo.
19. Yeah. So, I mean, you have to give him credit for that, So, and the Toronto's, they've been pretty bad for a long time. The last 2 years, they've been a contender. They won 10 games this year. First time they've done that since 2015. They won the East last year. So, maybe something better will come along for Toronto. We do need more Nathan Rourke's in the CFL, but I think MBT deserves some credit for what he's done in the CFL. He's not perfect. That's for sure.
I'm just going to say, sorry,
go ahead, Mark.
Strong probability that Toronto will host the East Final for a second straight year. That speaks to something. That's the way I see it.
It does, and I think Ryan Dinwiddie gets a lot of heat too. He's had a lot of questionable game management decisions, but look at what Ryan Dinwiddie's done the last 2 years. I know a lot of people like to say, "Well, Toronto's bought this team, right?" But when you look at their roster, look at all the people that have been injured. No Eric Rogers. They lost their starting center, who was an elite player, rookie Peter Nicastro last year. They're down to their fourth and fifth offensive tackle. They got Philip Blake playing at left tackle. So Andrew Harris obviously gone, Eric Rogers gone. They've had injuries all over the defensive side of the ball. So Ryan Dinwiddie's done a very good job for a young coach. Results speak for themselves. He's not, again, like McLeod, not perfect. His game management decisions leave a lot to be desired, but he's a good play caller, and they've done a good job. Toronto's winning games.
And let's give him credit for bringing out the best in McLeod Bethel Thompson too, because McLeod Bethel Thompson has a mega page list of all the prior teams he's been on. It's worked in Toronto, and I give a lot of the credit to Ryan.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Mark, because a lot of people thought that wouldn't mesh. Everyone figured Dinwiddie with Arbuckle, because they were together in Calgary, that would work out. It didn't. McLeod had to win over Ryan Dinwiddie. He didn't know the game. So he wins over a lot of people. Media members love him. His teammates love him. He's an easy guy to root for. So, but he can be aggravating for sure. And yeah, both those guys deserve credit. They're winning a lot together the last 2 years. Now, if they collapse in the playoffs, if they lose at home again to Hamilton and Montreal, they're going to get a lot of heat. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be back the following year, but they got to kind of finish the job. There's a lot of bitterness from the way things ended last year. And so I foresee a possibility where Hamilton might be knocking off Toronto at BMO Field again, which would be crushing. We'll see how that goes.
See, I'm going to be the one who's drinking the haterade in my coffee this morning because I see the same things. Ryan Dinwiddie, rookie coach, deserves more respect. He's second year on the job. I'm like, well, one, he had a trial year because he was the coach during the pandemic where he could get everything together. Two, who since he's been an Argonaut, what front office has spent more on player acquisition than the Argonauts? Three, they're 9-2 versus teams that are 500 or below. You're not going to see any of those teams. Well, actually, in the East, you might see a couple of them, but you're not going to see many of those teams in the playoffs. The whole goal is to win the Grey Cup, not win a lot of games. And my question is always: you love MBT, great. You love Ryan Dinwiddie, great. Do you think they are helping or hurting in the cause to win a Grey Cup? And if you think they're good enough to win a Grey Cup, God bless you. We'll see. I am a bit skeptical based on what I've seen, that they are at that level. And if you're MLSC, you're investing that money not to host one playoff game. You're investing that money because you're looking for sustained success. And hopefully that is the road to marketing the team better and getting more butts and seats long term.
It really turns in. I don't care if it's this podcast, CFL Hub, TSN, CFL.ca. The Argonauts and McLeod Bethel Thompson. Boy, the opinions they're unbelievable. Let's go out west, folks. Roughriders head coach Craig Dickenson, speaking to the media, says he's hopeful, quote, hopeful, he won't have to defend his coaching job to leadership. His lifetime career record as a coach with Sask, 28-20. Pretty impressive. What's the mood in Regina right now, Mark Steven?
Wildly angry. It's the hottest spot in the country, and I don't care where the forecast says where you are. It's the hottest spot. They are livid there with a team that started out strong, has fallen on some very hard times. They did host the Grey Cup in 2013 and won it. There was an expectation they'd be able to duplicate that feat. They're nowhere close to that. They aren't even close to the playoffs right now. So there's a lot of anger and rage in the air. And yes, Craig Dickenson is feeling an awful lot of it, but I suggest that some of it needs to go above him as well. Last year, they had a tough year with the offensive line. It didn't protect Cody Fajardo. What did they do to improve it? Nothing. So is that Craig Dickinson's responsibility or not? But there's a lot of anger in Regina, no question about that.
Donnovan?
I actually, I look at it and I look at coaching for some of this. And we last year said, the Riders maybe didn't reach their potential, but it's somewhat catastrophic to lose 4 guys on the first day of team activities, right? We're gonna give them a pass for that year. This year, though, hosting the Grey Cup, a team with somewhat of a talented roster, you know who your quarterback is going to be. As long as he doesn't hit the upright play in the football game, we're having a different conversation. But there's a football saying, you're either coaching it or you're allowing it. And the lack of discipline on the field, right? Like just playing football. Stay in your gap, keep contained, have proper distribution, protect your quarterback. The lack of discipline on the sideline, having guys who aren't dressed, getting, 15-yard penalties. And then the lack of discipline in terms of, we're going to kind of make some excuses for the behavior of Garrett Marino. We're going to defend him. We're not going to, see where the wind is blowing in terms of, what he routinely does. We're going to kind of, talk to our players that are getting ejected and say that we take a serious stance, but it continues to happen, right? To me, you're either coaching it or you're allowing it. So I'm not in the room. I don't know why it's happening. All the reports I get back from guys who have played for Dickenson, who are in other situations, that they love him and he's a great guy. And I actually think, a special teams guy normally has a pulse of the roster, Michael O'Shea being a great example. And so I do think if things don't end up, with him staying in Saskatchewan, he'll have other looks. But I do think, a lot of the blame has to fall on his lap, because I get it, Mark, in terms of the offensive line not improving. But I didn't look at this roster at the start of the year and saying, man, they're going to be fighting for the playoff life. I knew the West was going to be pretty competitive, but I thought, they would have as good a chance as anybody to host a playoff game and potentially get in the game that really matters when they're hosting the Grey Cup. And we know when Saskatchewan's hosting a Grey Cup, all chips in the middle of the table, we really want to cash in and get there. And that's not going to be the case this year.
You know, Mike, it's interesting. You bring up like the likes of Paul LaPolice, and by all accounts, every time I've dealt with Craig Dickenson, great guy, really friendly, polite. But I could say the same thing about Paul LaPolice, and that doesn't guarantee you that you're going to keep your job or produce winning results. So I feel like there's a lot of pressure out there, and even the general manager, I don't know what's going on there as well too with the Roughriders.
You know, typically when your coach has a winning record and you have a down year, you'll kind of get a pass. But, you know, Donnovan brought up some good points about how things have kind of melted behind the scenes, character issues, all that discipline. The other problem they have, Saskatchewan, and they've been bridesmaid syndrome for a while now in recent memory, because they're competing against, you know, and being compared fairly or unfairly to Calgary, who's a model organization, and obviously Winnipeg is a powerhouse. And now you got BC on the come up. We'll see what happens with Nathan Rourke. And so I think Saskatchewan management's got to sit down and figure out, you know, is Craig Dickenson the man that's going to put us in a position to compete with those guys? That's a difficult challenge out west, because Calgary's going to win every year. Winnipeg, we know how great they are. So, and now BC has a super, we'll see what happens with Rourke, whether he gets interest south of the border, but now BC is going to be an elite program themselves. They look like a playoff team every year, especially if they got that kid at quarterback. So, I mean, you know, problematic for Dickenson. He's in a tough spot. And the big thing is not just their record this year. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, even though they're theoretically still alive. But the big problem is how the locker room, the Garrett Marino incident, everything else that went down with their team, Duke Williams acting a fool. You know, you got a lot of problems. When you're losing the locker room and having those issues, management has to consider a change. They're going to need to hire a big time hire though to compete with the teams they have, the organizations they have in their own division there. So whatever decision they make, it's got to be the right one.
And Mike, that's not even considering that a guy they know well, Chris Jones, how many years before he rebuilt in Edmonton, especially with a guy like G. Simon, you know, by his side. So it's almost like you better get your wins now in the West, right? Because Edmonton, in terms of what Victor has done and the resources that they have, you know, they will be coming. So yeah, a real interesting scenario in Saskatchewan. And like, if you play fantasy sports and you're in a keeper league, we had a CFL keeper league. How many guys, like, based off of how they played this year, would you want to keep on that roster, right? Like they haven't developed guys to play better than the potential of their draft stock, and I think that's an issue as well.
And now you got
sorry.
But you got Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan's not only questioning their head coach for the future, they're starting to look at their quarterback side. Like Fajardo's a good quarterback, but now they're looking at him and going, well, he's not Caleros. Look at Rourke over here. So they're like, well, maybe we could try Bo. So it's gotten to the point now where they're like screwed up, you know, psychologically, mentally trying to figure out, well, how do we get our organization? This has been a very tough year for the Roughriders organization, for no question about it.
I think he deserves another shot, another opportunity. Clearly, they're going to have to tell him, you know, to deal with these guys much quicker, much harsher. You know, I felt bad for him with all this Garrett Marino stuff going on. Who was trotted out there every day to explain it? Him. Where was the people above him? Invisible. So, you know, maybe he had a lot more to deal with than what we realized. I know it's not a good record this year, but I look at 2 appearances in the West Final 2 years before that. So, see what happens, but there's no question. Nobody's under more scrutiny right now than him.
Folks,
well, Mark, if they do let him come back and start the year, right, similar to, you know, Paul LaPolice, and play your way out of a bad scenario. If it doesn't go well, they do have a guy like Jason Moss, theoretically, assuming he stays on staff, who's been a head coach before.
I don't think they like him either. There, Donnovan.
I wonder about that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. But so we'll see. I mean, there's only so many musical chairs, right? So if not one or two of them, who across the league is leaving, you know, their current situation, and coming, right? One of the reasons why the Argos probably, in my estimation, reached for a Dinwiddie maybe before he was ready is because they think like he could be the guy, and so we'll deal with the rough 1-2 years and get him up to speed because we want to secure one of those guys, and there's not many, which is why what happened in Ottawa with you know, the breakdown between, you know, the coaching staff and front office such a huge thing, because if you have a guy in your building who you know can win you a Grey Cup, you have to figure it out. You have to.
Yeah, fair
Folks,
enough.
you can win a trip to the Ticats October 29th away game in Ottawa with Journey Rewards. Simply hit ticats.ca/journey-rewards to enter to win 2 tickets on Via Rail, hotel and game tickets, plus a chance at other prizes, including an autographed Ticats jersey or a $250 gift card to the Ticats shop. Go on the road with the Ticats to Ottawa with Journey Rewards. And boy, that could be a really big contest. Mark, I'm going to stick with you here. You've seen these teams the most live, especially. Zach Collaros sat down for last week's game against the Lions. He did not play, but many of the Bombers' first team defensive members were on the field in what was, I thought, a shaky 40-32 loss to the Lions. Any concerns for Winnipeg here?
I would say probably not, based on one game. How much did Big Hill play? Kind of missed a few games or series there too. But just overall, it's hard to play at that elite level for the long time that Winnipeg has. Give them all the credit in the world for doing it. That's why they're the 2-time champs and they're the favorites to be the 3-time champs. No, they didn't look at their best. I agree with that. But no, I wouldn't be worried about it right now. It doesn't strike me as a trend. It was just a game where they weren't at their best. And, certainly the stakes were much, much higher for the BC Lions as well.
Mike, did they look a little leaky on defense to you?
A little bit, but, it's difficult to put much stock into it. You saw that a little bit with Toronto and Edmonton. There was nothing at stake for these teams. So, I was surprised that Winnipeg was actually competitive in that game. I figured they'd pull the plug early, start putting in backups, treat it like an exhibition game. And so I thought they were pretty feisty. Obviously, defensively, the Bombers didn't play very well. But I think the sense of urgency is much different in that setting. It's hard to doubt anything about Winnipeg's operation, to be honest with you. So the fact that they were competitive in a game that they really didn't need kind of told me something. They're in there with Drew Brown and all these other backups playing in the game. So I wouldn't worry about Winnipeg. There's really no reason to worry about them.
Donnovan, I guess it's fair to say that Drew Brown actually, gave the Lions 14 points. So, though I thought he kind of looked okay.
Not bad. Yeah. They got weapons with the Bombers for sure, with the receivers there. So that helped. But he had an okay game. That wasn't bad at all.
Yeah, first start against a really opportunistic defense. He looked okay. Listen, these are 2 teams thinking about the playoffs. One is thinking about making sure they're there and healthy, and one who's thinking about making sure they're there with a home field date in the first round. And so the different levels of motivation, I think, is a big thing. And the other piece is, let's be honest, Winnipeg's defense has been kind of leaky relative to what they've been in years past all year. When you look at the distribution of some of their assets, this is a team that is much more offensive minded, much more aggressive offensively, right? We have the memories of them being so dominant defensively, and now they're a bit more bend but don't break. And Zach has saved them in ball games. Think about the fact that they were talking about trying to go and get Kenny Lawler for the stretch drive. This is an entirely, a lot of same faces, same uniform, but in terms of the way they're winning games, it's much different. And Zach, when he first got there, was told, we got a great defense. You got a Hall of Fame back behind you. Hand it off, make 1 to 2 big plays a game, and we're going to be okay. Now they're saying, Zach, we're going to need you to make a couple big throws on every drive. And so he's done it. But I don't think that defense all year has been at the level that maybe we remember.
Mark, you've seen, I think, the Calgary and Bombers series may be the best all season long amongst any matchups this season that we've seen. Do you agree with that? Is this a slightly different look or approach, I'd say, for the Bombers this season?
There are some differences, but they remain very, very good. I mean, you mentioned Andrew Harris. Well, he's gone. Look at who they've plugged in there. He's filled the bill very, very well. Brady Oliveira, their receiving core, just a new hero. Where did Dalton Schoen come from? Look at what he's done. He's been amazing. I had no clue that, they lost a couple of the guys, Lawler being one. The defense, I understand there's maybe some differences there, but I call it the triangle of Hall of Famers that they've got there with Big Hill, Jefferson, and Jeff Coate. I think they're all fantastic. And they're different slightly, but they're still at an elite level. They're still a team to run down as far as I'm concerned.
Guys, Tim White, Dominic Rhymes, Dalton Schoen, as we just talked about, Eugene Lewis. And I know there's a couple others. We kind of touched on this earlier on the CFL this week, a couple of months back, but I want to go back to it. We're seeing more and more. Which receiver right now, Donnovan Bennett, is the most dangerous in the CFL at this point?
Man, I was hoping you weren't going to come to me first so I could just wax poetic about the guy that wasn't mentioned yet, because they're all really good. They all do it in a different way. If I had to choose one, and maybe he's the most dangerous, that's maybe shown, although Rhymes is dangerous when he gets balls. If I had to choose one, and I'm starting a team, it would be Eugene Lewis. Can run every single route in the route tree, dependable. Doesn't matter who's been playing at quarterback, you know what he's going to give you. And also a great leader in the room. So I would take him, but yeah, and Poppy White, being in this conversation, given what he's done lately, and not someone like Dunbar, who coming into the year was the true one on that offense, as a testament to how far he's grown. Schoen has made so many big plays, but if I had to choose one guy, it would be Eugene Lewis.
Who do you like, Mike?
Of that group, from a seniority standpoint, you got to go Eugene Lewis. He's the most elite receiver in the league. I sometimes wonder why Montreal doesn't target him more. Against Ottawa, he only had 3 catches, so I think they need to focus in on getting him the football more. He's got such a great catch radius. He's very difficult to defend. He almost plays like he's 6'6". Dalton Schoen, though, what an interesting story with him. He's having one of the greatest rookie seasons in the history of the CFL. So we got over 1,300 yards, 20 yards per catch, 15 touchdowns. And we talk about Nathan Rourke getting NFL opportunities. Dalton Schoen's going to get a call because the kid's very young. He's already had 4 stints in the NFL. He's been on practice squads with the Chiefs, and I think he's with the Chargers as well. So at Washington as well. So I think Dalton Schoen is going to be somebody who's going to get an NFL opportunity. He's very young. And when you look at his film from college, he's doing exactly what he did at Kansas State that he's doing in the CFL. He just continuously, in the early going, you figure, okay, teams will figure him out. He's not going to make big plays down the field every week. But here he is, especially his last few games. It's just been ridiculous. He's got 4 touchdowns. It's games where he's had 3 touchdowns. So he's been really impressive. I'm impressed with him, how he's kept up that high level of play. It helps being with Caleros. It helps being in that system, no doubt about it. Nick Dembski's a fantastic receiver too, tough guy, versatile. But Dalton Schoen, fascinating season. There have been some great, the Darryl Mitchells of the world and Nick Lewis's, guys who've had outstanding rookie seasons as CFL receivers. I can't recall too many American guys coming in and doing what he's done. And Winnipeg would have definitely been even more scary if they'd gotten Kenny Roller back. I think we would just wrap it up and give him the trophy at that point. But you might as well do that. You could theoretically do that now. But Schoen is very Eugene Lewis of that group. Tim White has been fantastic for Hamilton too. Eugene Lewis is the most accomplished, the most elite receiver in the league. Schoen's interesting there.
Well, you said that Lewis. By the way, this is a no-lose conversation. He got a lot of great players, but in my mind, you say that Lewis plays 6'6". Well, Dominique Rhymes, I think, is 6'6". He's 6'5.5". Does have the great catch radius. As I say, you wouldn't lose with either one of them. I guess I've just seen more from Rhymes, although Lewis is fantastic. They're both on the first team all CFL. No questions asked about that. So they're really, really tremendous players. But I guess he's got maybe a few more moves in terms of ability to go up and get 50-50 balls. But Lewis is very good too. This is not a knock on him. But if I had to pick, I would pick Dominique Rhymes with the way he's played this year. But as I say, nobody's wrong here.
Mark, Calgary have had so many of these kind of guys on a wide receiver, and they kind of have departed to other teams. And who's out there in Calgary right now that you think is on that list or would be close to on that list?
Malik Henry is probably as fast as there is in the league. He's been blowing by defenders all season long. Missed the game against Hamilton with an ankle injury. I think he'll be back against Saskatchewan this week. Not sure, but Malik Henry among the current players is right there in terms of his speed and just ability to get open behind defenders. He's not particularly physical, but he is very, very quick and very speedy, and his breaks are tremendous.
Donnovan, I think Tim White is getting there, and he's a guy that out of Arizona that I really, really liked. I might have been one of the few people that knew him just because I come home late and watch a lot of WAC football. But so I thought there was room for him to grow. I continue to see him grow. Would we put Curly Gittens Jr. on that list too, as a guy that's got some way to go, that the top end of what we may see 2 years from now may be there?
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think he's in the conversation with Dembski in terms of best Canadian receiver. But, between him and Tavares Daniels, it's 1A in terms of who is the number one in that offense. And we're not far removed when Curly Gittens Jr. coming out of Wilfrid Laurier was a number 5, right? Who was just the wide receiver who's running routes for exercise essentially, but slowly and surely, he's moved his way, up that ladder and into the middle of the field. And now he's the guy who they move him all around to get mismatches, and is a guy who, certainly they trust in big money situations. And, Mike mentioned that sometimes McLeod will miss a receiver when they're wide open. Man, I just watch and think, if I was Curly, I'd be thinking about all the incentives that I would be getting if McLeod hit me some of the times where I was wide open and he threw me a hospital pass, or he threw it into the stand. So yeah, he's in that conversation for sure. Real athletic, but real smart route runner. You're seeing him use leverage and pick up the nuances of playing slot in the CFL.
Final word to you there, Mike.
Yeah, it's funny. There are a lot of misfires between MBT and Curly Gittens. They do have a good chemistry with one another for sure. Toronto, it's the focus on Toronto a lot of times, all the big high-priced free agents they sign. They got an all-star center. They drafted Peter DeCastro. Curly Gittens is a great story. That's a third-round draft pick that the Argos picked up, and it's always awesome when a hometown guy, national player, emerges like that. So it's Curly Gittens, a terrific receiver. He's just scratching the surface. He's very close to going over 1,000 yards first time in his career. Fantastic. There's some really good Canadian receivers in the league with Dembski, the kid in Saskatchewan. So there's a lot of really good players there. But Gittens is one of the best route runners in the league. Very crisp, smooth player, fun to watch.
Guys, been an outstanding chat here on the CFL this week. You guys have been spectacular with your opinions and your insight, and that's what we're looking for here on the CFL this week on a weekly basis. And I know we're getting the response from the people that watch this and listen to this podcast. I mean, love having you guys on. Mark Steven, thank you again. Thank you so much for joining us. Mark Steven, where do we find you? And the people that want to speak to you, if they're a little angry with Calgary, how do they contact you?
Well, we're on the air on 770 CHQR in Calgary, or my Twitter feed is Mark on Football. So there you are. You can reach me there. And if you got anything to say, I love talking football all the time. So by all means, don't hesitate to reach out.
Mike, you are covering football on both sides of the border. Where do Jets fans find you?
You can find me at thejetpress.com. Also cover the CFL for CFLnewshub.com and the Toronto Argonauts. And I cover the XFL. They're coming about sooner or later. At XFLnewshub.com. My social media handle, of which I suck at social media, but my byline is at BYMIKEMITCHEAA.
Donnovan, you do not suck at social media. Where do we find you?
Just league average at social media. At Donnovan Bennett is a handle on Twitter and Instagram, DONNOVANBENNETT. And yeah, if you want to argue about whether or not MBT is good, I'm always happy to have those threads. I just like people who follow read progression. Sue me.
Hey, folks, we keep you up to date, entertained, and informed with lots of great content for your listening pleasure. Follow us on Ticats Audio Network, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you get your pods. Listen, like, subscribe. Hey, YouTube as well, too. Let us know what you think with a great review or even a bad review. We'll take it. We'd like to improve if that's the case. This is the CFL This Week. I'm Bubba O'Neil. We'll look forward to you being with us on the Ticats Audio Network next week.
The CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil. Subscribe, like, and get the deepest takes on Canada's game every Monday.